Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hardfire Media Liberal Conversations. My name is Cameron Weber. I'm the host and producer of Hardfire Media, and I'm an economist and historian. We're doing these liberal conversations during the unique time of unprecedented state exercise of power in certain places. The idea for the series comes from classical liberalism, which is based on free speech, freedom of religion, and equal rights under law. And we should also add a belief in the private sphere. These discussions are available on our Hardfire YouTube channel. And we had been recording at the Brick Arts Media House in downtown Brooklyn, but that's been shut now for the last 15 months. So we've been doing this on Zoom since the national emergency of March 2020, which we're still under. What's that, Defense Act, you know, where the state controls the means of production. I look forward to this conversation. This will be our June 2021 show on Brooklyn Free Speech Cable. We should note that we are more than 15 months into a lockdown, which is supposed to last 15 days while we all get herd immunity. The state never lets a good crisis go to waste. We are seeing some loosening of restrictions, but it remains to be seen to what extent we will recover our freedoms of movement and association. Today, we're going to talk about victimless crime, with the proposal that if there is no victim, there is no crime. The show is called Prohibition, Prostitution, and Gambling in New York. And this will be the first show of a two-part series. Now we'll introduce our guests. In the upper left-hand corner, we've got John Clifton. John, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Peace and freedom and grace be with you. And salute.
Nice to have you.
I'm a libertarian, long-term libertarian activist, party activity, involved with I and currently head of the Queens Continues the actual tradition of physically meeting per month. We've done most of the way through this ridiculous lockdown, and we'll be doing it in the months to come. And we're working on getting into other kinds of activity, fundraising and such. I'd like to have Matthew Morgan, to introduce him, come down and, talk about his campaign. And I'm, interested in a host of topics that I often also cover in a blog.
Yeah, you have a very active Libertarian Party in Queens with a lot of good speakers. And John has been organizing that for a long time. Okay, and John mentioned Matthew Morgan. Matthew, this is Matthew's second time on our show. Matthew is running for city council. Am I right, Matthew?
Correct. I'm running for District 39, which is Western Columbia waterfront, Durham Hills, Carroll Gardens, Gowanus, Park Slope, South Slope, Kensington, and Windsor Terrace. Running a very libertarian campaign of abolishing zoning, getting rid of regulations to save small businesses, criminal justice, and police reform.
And that ties into this topic of this show, right?
Correct. After what looks like a current implosion by the Diane Morales mayoral campaign, I believe I'm the only candidate who has come out and said sex work is work. So definitely ties into today's
yeah. Very good. It's as this guy says, Robert Nozick, sex work, prostitution, gambling are capitalist acts amongst consenting adults. So this is the famous Robert Nozick. If I haven't read it. And then a longtime guest and partner in the Hardfire is Derek Sacerdote. Derek, welcome to the show.
Namaste.
Great. So Derek is, all three of my guests have run for public office, and so it's great to have you. Great to have you. I met when Derek was running for. What were you running for, Derek?
I ran for City Council District 46 in 2009.
That's right. So we've known each other. We won't even add up the number of years that is. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so if a relationship is consensual, why should it be considered a crime in the legal code? Why does the state have a monopoly on gambling with the lottery? Why does the city decide or the state decide that in the supply and demand model, only the demand side faces arrest for prostitution? And then, oh yeah, we're also talking about prohibition, which recently New York State has decriminalized marijuana, have not completely legalized it, and are putting a kibosh on the people that can sell it. In other words, they're gaming the releasing of, or the freeing of the marijuana market by only issuing licenses to certain people, and that's going to happen over a year. Even though I know I can go and get marijuana tax-free at the local bodega. So they're not going to, and tax-free cigarettes, I know that they're not going to tax, they're not going to start taxing it at 10 or 12% or whatever, just because it's legal. So my question is, why do we, to you all, why do we have these things called crimes if there's no victim?
Is this a rhetorical question or a real question?
That's a real question. That's a question I'd like to start with.
Well, I think it depends on which of the three evil things we're talking about. In some cases, it's a desire to control the revenue, the revenue that is brought in by it being illegal, all the confiscations,
Yes,
of homes, of cars, of money.
asset seizures. Asset seizures. That's right.
In some towns, the entire police budget is based on the seizures from traffic stops. When they find narcotics or in one car, then you go beyond that car, that person's home, that person's property, the other cars they have. So it becomes a large, almost a main source of income for these police departments. When it comes to prostitution, maybe it's a little different. People seem to have a fear that, okay, maybe it's not just between those two people who are consenting adults, but this is going to sort of rub off and advertise to other people, like, my children or my family members who are going to see this and think that it's okay to participate in this kind of thing. And I think they like the idea that by arresting the buyers, that you're equating those same buyers with maybe the people who would be sexual predators, like take them off the streets, because the same people who would patronize prostitutes might also be sexual offenders. So go after them in any way you can.
Yeah, right. So it's a stretching the rule of law.
Yeah.
And into some form of parental, where the state turns into the parent.
Fear, yeah, it's a fear of what these freedoms represent, and that what these freedoms might do to their comfort in society.
Yes. People are afraid of freedom, right? Okay. And so you need the state to protect you from yourself. That's a good one. As an economist, I think a lot of it has to do with, there's a lot of vested interests. The DA, the prisons, all of that are big business for victimless crime. Matthew, would you like to talk about your campaign?
Yeah, so I would just say, in terms of things like prohibition and prostitution, it just seems like the state going after one problem by going after the by coming to the wrong conclusion. In terms of prostitution, they go after prostitution and say they're trying to stop human trafficking.
Yeah,
It's
which is a different crime.
They convolute it all the time. They say that these sex workers are victims. A lot of them aren't victims.
No.
They're just, this is their profession, this is what they're choosing to do. You want to go after human traffickers, that's fine, but stop mixing it and melanging it with this totally legitimate consensual form of business. In terms of prohibition, in the 1920s, it was a scare factor. Men are beating their wives. Okay, solve that fucking problem then. That's the problem right there. Men are beating their wives. Don't go after the alcohol. Go after men who are abused. Go after domestic abuse. Give women a safe place to go. Don't just get rid of alcohol. And in terms of gambling, I mean, I'm not really sure why gambling is illegal. Well, I'm guessing maybe they went after the mafia and then so they got rid of it as a way to crack down on them. I'm not sure.
I want to.
But in the end, it's just all fear. They just use fear. Politicians never miss an opportunity to use fear to gather votes. I'll stop this bad thing from happening. Just vote for me.
Well, we see a lot of the fear creation during this pandemic period, no doubt.
Right.
I just wanted, back to the prostitution thing, two of my favorite musicians who moved to New York were male prostitutes, Dee Dee Ramone and Richard Lloyd, before they started making money on their music.
Right.
John, what's your take?
Now, my take on this takes from different perspective. And the way I want to start this is to say about 15 something years ago, the Libertarian Party tried to rework its platform to not simply state its position, but to structure a presentation which went along the lines of, here's a problem, here's the principle of the libertarian or the classical liberal principle behind it. Here's this, and here's a proposed pathway to start to implement that solution. And I had a problem with the second part of that process, where you try to dumb down an issue down to one principle or one element, when many issues have several elements. In the case of the sin issue of prostitution, gambling, and whatnot, the issue is not just what's going on in terms of activity, and in terms of should there be freedom for that, and should there be lack of government involvement, but does any reflection of the activity require state involvement in order to create some kind of protection or defense of rights and liberties of the population? And this is where the complication comes in. When you say, if no one is a victim, or if there is consensual activity among all the people involved in certain activities, prostitution and whatnot,
Prohibition again.
then listen, if there's no consent, if there is consent and there's no victim, there's no crime.
That's right.
There is a aspect about the qualification because of the difference between different places where libertarians come from. Some come originally from the right, some come from the left, and evolved to a consistent libertarian position. However, that leads to a different application of the non-aggression principle and of where victimhood begins. In the case of prostitution, gambling, you can make the argument, which is what the right libertarians do, which I'm sympathetic to, I will admit, that there is a victim, and we can go into that later. But I'm going to just stop here by saying that there's a qualification regarding that matter, and that leads to differences of approach in the way different parts of the country, different parts of the world may handle or ignore gambling or prostitution.
We don't want to talk about, let's hear your right libertarian I mean, this is a fundamental issue.
Okay.
No victim, no.
Mhm.
You're saying you can have a
Well,
victim with consenting adults?
well, in terms of human beings, there are no human in a consensual activity between prostitute and the person that prostitute is working. There is no victim. In terms of the universe that God made, that this country understands is supposed to be the basis upon which we created the Constitution and the order that we currently have to protect people's God-given rights. That means God is a victim. Universe he made, this is the moral code he established, and he, according to the Bible, my Bible at least, says God personally grieves sins. That means, if you can Judeo-Christian understanding, there's a victim.
Okay. But is there,
I mean, I think for many on the left, just to tag on to what you said, those who oppose prostitution or all sex work, the angle that they come with is that these are the job choices of the extremely desperate. So to allow them to make these desperate choices is almost like we're victimizing them by allowing them to make these are not first choices. These are not things people would do when they have other options. That's their premise, and that a kind society does not allow people to make these very desperate last ditch choices to earn a living.
Which I would say,
It's a stereotype.
there's a lot of people who would say, they don't want to work in this field, sex work, they don't know. And it's just like, go to McDonald's. Say, is anybody here working here because they're desperate for money and want to get out of this field? Every fry cook will go, yes, I don't want to work here. I'd like a better job. But then again, there's sex workers who are making millions of dollars, and they're like, I like the flexibility. I have kids, so it allows me to work when I need to. It allows me to travel, all this. So yeah, there's some people who are working there desperately, but there's some people who definitely aren't.
And there are people who are teachers and social workers who feel just as desperate in their jobs too. So I feel like that. Yeah. I feel like that argument falls flat.
And then for those who it's against their religion, they're free not to participate. I mean, yeah.
But what about their children passing by those avenues where they see the transaction? It's not going to corrupt their children.
Well,
that's why we should decriminalize it and allow them to open brothels.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't see people. I mean, of course you do. Occasionally, like if you go out at like 3 a.m., you'll see people stumbling drunk out on the street. But we keep bars, we keep it, inside. Well, not now that New York City has done outdoor time. You get what I'm trying to say. We try and contain that.
Yeah, I mean, you should
don't see, and criminalizing it and forcing them out on the streets is obviously not what we want. And the way to fix it is to decriminalize it and allow them to move into comfortable, safe spaces.
That's right.
Makes sense.
There is a logic behind that. I'd say the argument from pragmatism that bleeds into this, and we clearly talk about this when it comes to drug usage or marijuana usage. If somebody is smoking weed in their basement, if there wasn't a big law and order apparatus, would anybody be breaking into somebody's house to capture or confiscate the marijuana in somebody's basement? These kind of activities happen mainly because we have maybe a too large state that is involved in too much in interference with people's lives. That would not actually happen as a pragmatic matter if people had to directly intervene and try to say, well, I'm against this, so I'm going to stop this person from doing it. That's obviously a straightforward libertarian approach. I go back to the issue, though, that there is a no one-size-fits-all answer to how people approach the issue of victimhood and consent. If you believe in something like the traditional, theological view of the world as dominant in the last 2,000 years, God is not simply a belief you have in a corner of your mind somewhere. He's supposed to be the center of your being, in the center of the way you understand how social activity is supposed to happen, and coordinated and brought under the heel of the Lord. In that context, the activity that is consensual between two individuals may not be consented to by the Lord of Hosts or the author of liberty. And that's where some communities have decided to enforce those laws against sin and behavior. That's
voluntarily.
And that's where differences emerge. Some parts of the country are not going to ever go in that direction. Other parts of the country, let's say, go down to the Bible, a victim, and that their neighborhood needs to reflect the wishes and consent of God. That justifies the use of government to protect that society from being what they believe overrun by
we seem to have lost John again. Okay, we'll just keep going. So a lot of and when John comes back, we'll have him continue on. A lot of, I think, victimless crime has to do with the prison industrial complex. There are a lot of police unions and district attorney offices.
Derek,
Prison
nodding heavily.
Prison owners who gain from mass incarceration. This is captured in Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, which was, it's now, they have a new edition, a 10th anniversary edition called The New Jim Crow, about number of incarcerated Americans. So here you can see, starting in around 1973 with Nixon's war against drugs, you'll see that the number of people in the United States who are now in prison and in jail, it's gone down slightly, but the United States still is by far the most incarcerated nation in the world. We're number one, even China, and that you'll see that all kicks in with Nixon's war on drugs.
And there are towns where, especially in the South and the Midwest, where the politics of the individuals may go one way, but the understanding is these prisons run the entire economy. So people make the pragmatic choice that, well, I might not be in favor of this or that, but hey, this town has all these people working here. This prison brings all these people working here. That brings in customers for this store and this gas station and so forth.
Yeah, that's
make that pragmatic choice that should stay there.
Yeah, that's Keynesian economics. It's what's seen and what's seen and what's not seen. You get rid of the prison, and no telling what else will come along, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so it's obvious that the prison creates jobs, but you wouldn't know what. Back to John's point, where's the moral and ethical values of creating jobs for people running prisons? Right?
Yeah, I think they failed to consider that when they often kind of otherize the people who are in the prisons as, we're here in the town and those are other people who are not our concern. So I think that's a very good mental rationalization for it.
And that's what the state is very good at. It's conflict. The politics by definition is conflict. whereas private behavior by definition is cooperation.
Mhm.
So John, we lost John Clifton, or he's here.
Trying to log back in.
I guess he's having technical difficulty. I'm directing the show, so I've got to check the time, see how much time we've got going. All right, so we've got about 3 minutes left
Mhm.
on our first on prohibition, prostitution, and gambling in New York. We've talked about theoretically and ethical issues and prison industrial complex issues. On the next show, we're going to talk specifically what the status is in New York on those three. We also paternalism, state paternalism, sex could be an addiction, gambling could be an addiction, alcohol or prohibition or marijuana or cocaine could be an addiction. So you need the state to protect yourself from yourself. That's paternalism, and that's what this is. That what the state has turned us into? Children.
Yeah.
When the state acts as a parent, people act as children.
But yeah, we need to stop criminalizing like addiction. Addiction can happen to anybody in any sense of different things. I mean, the bad ones are obviously drugs, gambling, stuff like that, but there's tons of other addictions. But what we really need to do is start funding, like helping them, not criminalizing them. That is shown not to work. We need to do things like, I like the centers where people can come and get free needles to use heroin, and then there will be people there that will help them get off the addiction, give them a comfortable place to admit that they're having a problem instead of the police showing up, which makes people tense up. I'm much more into the preventative, moving people away instead of ruining their lives.
That's very liberal of you, Matthew.
Ethical.
John, you made it back. So we've got just about 1 more minute. We've got just about 1 more
All
minute.
right, and I will say that again, that there is room for obviously personal liberty among the other liberties we have. There may be disagreement among libertarians regarding consensual, activity or victimhood and the existence of it. And I would say conservative libertarians who came from that background believe there are elements of victimhood.